Thanks everyone for being here. Hopefully you are here for visual regression testing. If not, maybe go check out one of the other rooms. These slides are up. If you go to the schedule and find the session page, there's a link there. I also have them here and kind of they'll be at the bottom throughout, or I'm @TaylorME on Twitter. But please, if you have questions or you're watching on the live stream, ask them on the website and we'll maybe have time for Q&A at the end. Otherwise, I will follow up with later and answer questions as I can there. And so I'm a developer programs engineer at Pantheon, which is kind of a fun job. We're actually hiring, so if this seems like something that interests you, happy to talk about that as well. But I do a lot of consulting with our agency partners. So we work with a lot of agencies and developers, and I help them with complex workflows, automated testing, these sorts of things. How do you wrangle Composer and WordPress? And so I want to share a little bit about what I learned with you today. And outside of that, I'm actually local to Portland, so I love all the great outdoor stuff, the good food, the good beer, lots of things around here. But beyond doing all of that stuff, working at Pantheon, enjoying the outdoors, I'm a maintainer of websites, and I have been for a long time, and I bet most of you are too. So not even just professional websites. My dad's company needs a website. He goes, can you refer an agency knowing full well that I'm going to end up building it? Right? Or I got married earlier this year, needed a website for the wedding and registry and RSVP and all this stuff. I'm going to build it, right? So we maintain lots and lots of websites. And all of those websites, or at least some of them, are running WordPress. And you have to update these, especially running on kind of open source stuff. I love open source, but it's sort of, you get all of these great tools, but they say like free as in beer, right? So you still have to do the work. I like to say free as in a dog. You can go adopt a puppy, but you still have to feed it and take it to the vet and exercise. Like, you got to do all the work, right? So WordPress needs to be updated, need to keep it secure, and those updates need to happen pretty frequently. And after you run updates, hopefully nobody's doing that straight on their live website. We know cowboy coding is bad. We're not FTPing in like it's the 90s. So we're updating on a staging site or something. We update WordPress core, all of our plugins, all of our themes, everything else. And then we go look, right? We go look at our staging site that we just updated, our test environment. We go look at the live environment, and this is just showing kind of the homepage. If we want to get fancy, we'll look at them side by side. Gonna go check mobile because that's important as well, and make sure all our different viewport sizes are looking really well. And this is just one template. You probably go check others, plenty of important pages on your website, but did anyone notice what was different with those, right? Let's go back. There is something different between these. Yeah, and it's kind of hard to notice, right? We kind of, if I told you there's something different, you kind of look and you can maybe pinpoint it out. But as humans, when we're going through dozens of templates on dozens of websites on multiple viewports, trying to see if things change, this stuff is really easy to miss, right? But you know what? Your clients or your users will notice this. On the left is the site before updates. On the right is after. Okay, there's now a label there that maybe that was hidden before for the word search. That's there. That's not too big of a deal. But the button is actually running over the bottom of the container right on the border. And so if you have a little bit of OCD, that's going to bug you and you want to fix it. So these are the types of things that it's really kind of tedious to do this. And as humans, we miss these sorts of things. So who does this? If you update WordPress and then go look at your test site and your live site and visually you try and see if anything's broken. Okay, good. Some people are being honest. Some people just click update and let it run. That's, you know, maybe that works for you, but I wouldn't advise it. So, and again, you have to repeat this for not just the homepage, but all of these templates, different sites. And if you're really being rigorous about running updates, you are checking daily. or meet more often than that? And what happens if a big vulnerability comes out, right? You see that sometimes with plugins and things. Then you have to go update all of your sites as quickly as possible, and all of this QA work, you're just doing it over and over and over. This is something we're never going to stop doing as maintainers of websites. And so I propose that we make the robots do the work. There's lots of great tools. If they can serve sushi and now cars are going to be able to drive themselves, why can't they help us with our QA as well? And so this talk is about visual regression testing. This is one type of testing tool. There are tons of types of automated testing. We'll get into that a little bit more, but I would encourage you to explore different ones. And instead of going to look at these pages and put my browser windows side by side and compare things and try and do it myself, this is a nice report. And it caught the change straight away. And I get this little scrubber and I can see before and after. And now I'm using my mental energy and my brain power instead of remembering, oh, I need to go through this list of all the templates I have to check and make sure this is working. All I do is analyze the report and make the decision of, okay, this failed. We can see the search button change very easily. Instead of trying to hunt that down, now I just go in, fix the CSS, get the button right, and move on with my life. And so this is visual regression testing. It takes a headless browser. The tool I like to use is called Backstop.js. We'll talk about that. But it essentially uses Chrome to go in, visit the different URLs, take screenshots of your live site, your staging site, and then it compares pixel by pixel those screenshots. So this is kind of what it's doing under the hood. Is we're going to go, let's say this is a live site. Then we have our test site. It's taking both of these screenshots, set them up side by side. If we overlay them, you can kind of see the difference. And so this is what it's doing when it's generating these reports. And maybe, you notice that the headlines and things changed, but this even caught the little read more link changed as well. So it gets pixel by pixel every detail. Those things that we miss as humans and we're not going to spot, it's going to catch because it's analyzing pixel by pixel. And so there are lots of benefits to this. You can have it test as many templates as you want. You can set up multiple viewports, so if you need desktop or mobile, it's pretty easy to configure and get up and running quickly. And of course, you get these nice reports to look at when you're done. But you can have this robot vision, essentially, where you're going in and instead of, I'm going to miss things, go pixel by pixel. And so I kind of want to show you guys what that looks like. And so I took this tool and I built a little node application for actually WordCamp Europe. I did a workshop there earlier this year that was more hands-on, and we built this node application. But I'll have links in the slides and at the end. If you want to go to GitHub and download this application, I want you to walk away from this talk with something you can actually start using. So we'll take a look at this. You run it. You'll have a list of sites in there. And once the app starts up, you'll be able to select a site. And I can kind of scroll through them. And once I select one, it's actually firing up. And this is running Headless Chrome. And what headless means is there's no open window, there's no UI. So it's just running Chrome in the background, taking those screenshots, saving them. You can see it's closing each browser session. It's comparing the screenshots, generating the report, and here we go. I can come in, one of my tests passed, 5 failed. This is just kind of a demo site I have in here. But if I were to go in, we can kind of take a look at what's changed. So the diff will show you that overlap when we kind of looked at earlier. It's laying the screenshots on top of each other and showing you the difference. The references are live. That's what we're referencing. The test is what we're comparing it against, our staging server, whatnot. So you can look at those, and then you can look at the scrubber too. So come in and see side by side. So in this case, it looks like address kind of moved into the sidebar. some of the stuff got bumped down. So I would want to go in and sort of see what's going on here and why this is looking different, and go in and figure that out after I ran updates. And that code is on GitHub. So if you come in, I have links again in the slides. You can get those on the session page. I'll link out to the GitHub repo. And there are instructions in here if you want to go through and edit. There is a file in here just called sites to test. You can play around with that. And basically you have a production URL, a non-production, and then an array of templates, like URLs that you want to test when the app runs. So you can edit that. If you want to go in and edit some of the visual configuration for the tool, you can play around with that. So here I have 2 viewports, a desktop and a mobile. If you wanted to add tablet or something like that, the README kind of walks you through some of those instructions. So I want you to be able to take this, walk away, and as you're updating WordPress and plugins and things, try this out and just see what you think of some of the automated tools and get a feel for it. And save yourself some of that time and energy from doing all of that review yourself. And so this was my backup kind of screenshot in case, live demos, you never know how that's going to go. So there's that. But this is really, I want to talk about too, automation is a journey. So I want to hopefully get you excited about visual regression testing, use the Node app, and then think about how you can work more automation into the rest of your workflow and what you're doing, whether it's you, your team, that sort of thing. So GitHub acquired this service called Dependabot. It used to be a paid service, but it will open a pull request. And if you're using a dependency manager like Composer, or if you're using NPM and you have packages and things like that, we'll open pull requests automatically for you to update those dependencies. I have WordPress running with Composer. That's a whole nother session. There are plenty of topics on that if you want to figure out how to do that. But if you're doing that, this bot will come in and open a pull request whenever you have an update to like WordPress core and plugins and stuff. But you see their step number 3 here is it says Dependabot will check for updates, open a pull request, and step number 3 says you review and merge. Well, wait, our visual testing can help, right? So I actually have this running so that the bot comes in, it runs on a cron every day, checks for updates, submits a pull request to GitHub. That spins up a new staging, like test copy of the site with all those updates, a new development environment, ships those out. My visual test runs with Headless Chrome, takes screenshots and everything, because if I'm running updates on plugins and stuff, the front end of the site shouldn't change, right? If it's a security update, that kind of thing, the front end shouldn't be changing. If those visual tests pass, then I can go ahead and merge it in. And so I have links to my own blog uses this. So if you're interested in that and kind of the whole CI setup, there's lots of code in there I'm not going to dive into now. But this ran 22 hours ago. So about this time yesterday, I was actually at the WP Rig workshop here at WPCampus. And so I just had the automation going in and making this pull request, running the QA and everything to the point where I'm confident enough that I can come in and just hit merge. And if all my tests pass, it's going to merge in and deploy out to the live site. And if you have enough automation in place and enough tests, you can kind of cover all of your bases. So visual regression is one piece of it, but there are limitations, right? It's not going to check if the drop-down menu still works or if the contact form doesn't submit. So there are other types of testing, but hopefully with the visual testing, even with this happening, you have reports saved in the cloud and stuff. So if I wanted to go review this, I can click on the link. And instead of running this in the Node app on my local machine, you take it a step further and run it automatically every time you have a pull request or something else that happens. And so visual regression is this great baseline, and then you want to stack other tests on top of it. So WordPress WordPress core has been doing end-to-end testing for Gutenberg that also runs Headless Chrome, but it can do things like create a new post and add blocks and do all sorts of stuff, right? More kind of integration tests. End-to-end tests, you can run those, you can run load tests, you can do performance tests, you can do all kinds of stuff. But the idea is start with this visual piece because that's likely what you're doing now with your manual QA. Automate that and then take that time you save and reinvest it to start adding more tests to the point that you have a more complete coverage where once all the tests pass, you're confident enough that your QA is done, you're good to go. And it takes a while to get there. It definitely is a journey. Don't try and implement, a dozen test suites in a weekend. Start with the visual stuff, wrap your head around that, and then build more as you go. And so after you play around with the visual, the next one I would recommend adding is Lighthouse. This is a tool by Google. You can use it in Chrome Developer Tools. But they also have a Node JavaScript package and a command line tool that you can just run it on its own. And I found out that I needed to use Lighthouse in addition to visual testing kind of the hard way, is that I was running these visual tests and I got a little too overconfident. And I said, oh, great, all my updates ran. The visual looks the same. I'm going to ship it. Well, it turns out if things visually look the same, but the site is 30% slower, that's a bad thing. So Lighthouse will check performance. They also have audits for accessibility and some other things. So now you can take that and add that in as well. So start with the visual, and then once you get that working, also run a Lighthouse audit and do some other things and start using these tools to help you determine if your site is passing your QA process. And so I built that in, that when these pull requests happen, I do the visual check, but I also run Lighthouse. And if the score drops more than 5 points, the test fails, the kind of red X there, and I'm not able to merge it. You can actually set up permissions on GitHub so that someone can't go in and do it. So, if you have folks on your team and they're feeling crunched for time or whatever, and they might be tempted to click the button anyway, you can actually set up permissions to block that, which is pretty cool and kind of keeps everyone honest a little bit. And so I've worked with lots of agencies and developers who have adopted automation over time, and there are quite a few benefits you get from that when you start adopting automation. So you get reduced overhead because you're not spending manual hours doing this stuff anymore. I think of all the times I went in and compared home pages side by side and went to different templates and stuff. You are actually saving hours. And if you have, you're updating sites like internally on campus, or even if you take a freelance project on the side or something, your job is to keep the sites up to date and secure. Nobody cares whether you spend 10 hours checking manually or a tool does it in 10 minutes, right? So if you can shave off those hours that we kind of call billable hours, it's not the same if you're working internally, but if you had clients and stuff, that's not something you can bill for, right? So we call those billable hours, but even it's stuff you can reprioritize and save that time and actually spend time fixing the things instead of finding what's wrong. You get consistency. So if you are being honest, and I've worked with a lot of teams and talking to people, they say, oh yeah, sure, we look at a dozen templates on every website and we fill out the contact form every time there's any update to anything. Do you really? If you start using these automated tests, you can really enforce that entire QA process in a consistent manner because now it actually is feasible to do it every single time there's an update to anything. So you really get consistency in your process and workflow. And even when you are crunched for time, you just wait for the test suite to run. And you can go get a coffee or work on something else. And that mitigates a lot of risk. The more QA and testing you're actually doing, rather than kind of putting it off, or maybe you missed something, right? If it's going pixel by pixel, maybe I missed that search button. Well, what if it was a bigger bug than just that being outside of the div? What if it was something that's going to take a template down, or a donation form stops working, or whatever it is? If you add more automation to your QA process and you get a more robust suite running, there's a less likely of a chance that you're going to ship bugs, right? You're mitigating that risk. And that gives you a lot of confidence. It gives people on your team confidence and others. And especially, if I go back and look kind of at pull requests and things, I work on open source projects as well. And if you start introducing, if you have things that are open source and stuff and you're looking for contributors, then going in and having all of these checks run, if somebody's a first-time contributor to a project, or you're onboarding a junior dev or something, right? Or someone else is working on one of the projects you're working on, and they open their first pull request, they submit some code, and they see all of these green checks, that gives them confidence that they're working with your code base the right way. It gives you confidence that you can accept that change. So it's not just covering your own butt, it's making sure that anyone that interacts with your code base gives you the confidence that that code coming in, no matter where it's coming from, is going to be quality and pass all of your QA. And so you could have, a document somewhere that says, anytime you make a code change, please go through these dozen things and test this and that, but you don't know if someone's going to do it, right? So put the guardrails in place, make sure that it happens every time, and you'll have that consistency, that risk mitigation, and lots of confidence. And again, automation is a state of mind. So really start with the visual test. Try this little note app I wrote out, see what you think of it, and work with it locally, right? Don't jump straight into doing it automatically on pull requests every time, because if you're new to automation and stuff, you do have to configure these things a little bit. And if you configure it wrong and it's running on every pull request or on a cron every hour, then you're, oh shoot, I have to drop everything and go fix this. So start, run it on your local machine, get other people on your team using it for a couple weeks, get comfortable with the workflow, and then totally, work your way towards the full automation. But just explore the tools that are out there. There are lots of great testing tools. I like Backstop.js for the visual regression testing. It's an open source tool. There are services that do a lot of this stuff. If you don't want to take the time or the energy to set up an open source tool, you can pay somebody X dollars a month to do this kind of thing, but I prefer open source myself. And so just get used to it first and gradually step into it. Again, don't spend an entire weekend trying to bring in a dozen test suites or set it up for every project. Like, start small and work your way up. It really kind of is a journey, but keep in the back of your mind, think about what you're doing day to day, or next time you're working on a project, like, wait, could I automate this? And just start making a plan to actually save the time. And so I have some resources, have a lot about learning about visual regression testing. Backstop.js is the repository I like to use, the tool I use that I built the little note app with. So if you want to know more about that, lots of articles here. So if you want to dive deeper on visual regression testing, please read some of those. The app that I showed off is up on GitHub. It has the nice README that'll kind of walk you through editing some of the files and things. So please download that, use it, stop looking at your websites yourself when you do the visual QA. And then if you want to get really deep into the kind of composer and WordPress and all the tests on pull requests and stuff, you can take a look at my blog is running that. And so I have a whole ton of test suites running there, a whole build process and everything. So if you want to really dive deep and look at what the advanced Circle CI kind of file looks like, go take a look at that. I'd be happy to answer questions on the bash scripts and that kind of thing. I have a contact form on my site. Just reach out to me. And happy to chat about that kind of stuff. But now we have a few minutes for questions. We can take some in the room. Again, you can submit those on the website, and feedback as well is always appreciated. So if anyone has questions on automation or testing or visual regression.
I just thought of this, so I haven't had time to type. So here goes. If I got a page that periodically, for each page load, it loads in a different image.
Yep.
So backstop.js grabs one version, other version has a different image in it. Does that just say this is different, look at it manually, or does it do?
Yeah, I'll repeat the question for the live stream. So the question is, what happens if you have sort of dynamic elements on a page? An image that changes on every page load, a rotating testimonial, a carousel, right? Any of that kind of stuff. So we'll actually go look at backstop.js. And this is just kind of the homepage for the project. Their mascot's a little funky, but you come in and look, and you can get started with installing and stuff, but they have a configuration file. And it has a lot of options for it. And one of them, you have hide selectors and remove selectors. And so this is actually running Headless Chrome. It's built on top of Puppeteer as well, which controls Headless Chrome with JavaScript. So the backstop tool is written in JavaScript. It just kind of narrows things down and lets you easily create a config. And it tells Headless Chrome to take the screenshots and all that, so you don't have to worry about it. But you can use hide selectors and give it a CSS selector, and it will basically ignore that element when it's doing the test. So you can give it that div ID or class or whatever, and it will ignore that image. You just have to be aware that that is now a hole in your automated QA, and that's something that maybe you'll want to test a different way, add some different sort of test to catch it. And like I said, Backstop can do quite a bit because it does run on Headless Chrome. You could go really nuts and it will take an existing cookie, and you could try and get into the WordPress dashboard and take screenshots. It's really not meant for that. Go look at end-to-end testing tools, especially the WordPress one. Will allow you to go in, and it's more built to do that kind of stuff. This is more built to compare the visual. So take different types of tools, and if you figure out that when we run the visual tool, you can't check the drop-down menu, or if the contact form works, find a different tool that will fill that need, and you build up multiple tools to kind of hit it from different angles so you get a cohesive QA experience. Yeah. Other questions?
When you're building these tools out, like the automation, what do you use for a database to compare against? Do you use the same database as a local, or are you comparing production?
Yeah, so the question is, what database do you use? Personally, when I was showing, with the pull requests and stuff, that's my own website. It's not huge. So every pull request, I spin up a new environment, and that pulls a fresh copy of the database from the live site. If that's something, I've worked with teams that have a large database, and doing that frequently is not feasible. So I've seen folks spin up a sort of their staging instance, and then every night at midnight or something on a cron, they'll sync the live database back down to their staging instance. So what you're queuing against is at worst 23 hours old or whatever it is before the next job runs. So there are different strategies you can use, but yeah, you definitely want to use live content, especially with the visual test, because if there's a new post that's been published on the live website or something else, it's going to throw those off because your recent post will be off by one, and then the whole test is kind of blown. So it really depends on the tool too. If you are using a different sort of test suite, like some of the end-to-end tests that will go in and fill out a contact form, if you have a new post, that really doesn't affect that, right? So it depends what you're doing, but I always try and use data that is as close to production as possible, because otherwise, if you're QAing with stale data, there might be something that's different on the live site, and then even though your QA passed, you didn't actually QA what's really going on. So I try and get infrastructure as close to the live site, data as close to the live site, and that way your QA is sort of like a dry run before you actually launch. Cool. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you all very much. If you think of more questions, Martin's. I don't know. I just found out like a week ago that Dependabot got acquired by GitHub and became free. So I started adding it to my projects. So yeah.
So you've only done it for weeks, so do you know that tool well enough to answer a question about it?
Dependabot will go in and open a new REPL request for each dependency, which, if you have like 5 dependencies that updated, then you get 5 PRs. So that's, I don't know. Go check it out. It might be for you. It might not be. It's a personal preference. So, all right. Well, thanks everyone. If you have more questions, post them on the website. Happy to answer those. Please leave feedback and stuff. And thanks for watching.